Today I want to talk about the exposure triangle. This nifty visual is a great way to explain everything that goes into the exposure of an image. My name is Timothy Reese, and I've worked in the television, film, and photography world as a director of photography and a photographer for nearly 20 years. Check out my videos as we cover not only the how, but also the why of various technical and creative techniques used in the creation of real images. The triangle is composed of three sides: the aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. These are the three complementary controls that we have at our disposal when it comes to exposing our image correctly. They all work together to control the exposure of your image, and each lever comes with an additional creative impact to your final image. I have a specific video that goes deeper into the creative characteristics of each one of these controls if you want to learn more. But let's begin with the first side of the triangle, the aperture. The aperture, commonly referred to as the iris, controls how much light hits your camera's sensor. A lens has a diaphragm at the rear end called the iris. This mechanism of overlapping metal flaps can twist down to a tiny pinhole or open wide to a large opening. The more open it is, the more light gets in and hits the sensor. The more closed it is, the more light is stopped from reaching the sensor. The number that relates to the size of this opening is called the f-stop and is expressed as a ratio calculated by dividing the focal length of the lens with the diameter of the lens's entrance pupil. So the numbers that reflect your aperture might seem odd or counterintuitive at first. It's not like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. The actual range of numbers is standardized, such as f1.4, f2, f2.8, f4, etc. Each change in number from one to the next is referred to as a stop, and is the equivalent of cutting the light transmission to your sensor in half, and hence the brightness of your image. So an image exposed at f2.8 will be twice as bright as one exposed at f4. The key to remember is this rule: the lower the number, the wider the aperture, and hence the more light will reach your sensor. The creative characteristic side effects of using your aperture to control exposure is that it will affect your depth of field. To put it simply, that means how blurry the background will be behind your subject. When and why you would want more or less depth of field will be discussed in another video. But for now, just know that a wider aperture, meaning a lower number, is going to result in a shallower depth of field and a softer background. Moving on now to shutter speed, which determines how long your sensor is exposed to light and is usually referred to as a fraction of time, such as 1/48 of a second. Similar to how f-stops work with shutter speed, each time you double or half the number, you make a one-stop change. For example, if you want to cut the brightness of your image by half, you can change your shutter speed from, say, 1/50th of a second to 1/100th of a second. The creative characteristic side effects of using shutter speed to control your exposure is its effect on motion blur. The longer you expose an image, the more blur is going to happen. This can be seen in video with blurriness to handheld camera footage, or a subject if they are moving in the frame. If your cell phone doesn't work well in low light, it's going to slow down the shutter to try to let more light in. This is why all those late night photos in the bar might be as blurry as your memory. For video, the general rule of thumb is that your shutter speed should be twice as fast as your frame rate. So for example, if you're shooting 24 frames per second, you would want your shutter speed to be 1/48th. To accurately portray motion similar to how our eyes see it. This creates a balanced amount of motion blur that doesn't appear too choppy, but also isn't so blurred that it affects overall sharpness. For photography purposes, shutter speed actually offers more creative choices since there's no frame rate to base a rule off of. We'll cover additional creative and technical reasons behind certain shutter speed choices in another video. The last side of the exposure triangle is ISO, which stands for, and I'm sure you guessed it, the International Organization for Standardization. Totally explains what it means, right? Don't worry, it's not important. All you need to know at this point is a one-stop adjustment by doubling or halving the number will change your brightness just like the other controls. Many camera manufacturers will rate their camera sensors at a specific ISO number. You want to try and stay around this number when using manual settings to achieve what the manufacturer feels is the best performance of the sensor in regards to sensitivity, noise, and dynamic range. The creative trade-off to using this control is that if you get too high, you can end up with noisy images, and if you go too low, you can end up with images that have a reduced amount of dynamic range, more of which we'll discuss in another video. In general, stay near what's called the camera native ISO with a little give in either direction, and you'll be fine. And you can use this control with little change to your image characteristics. So that's the exposure triangle. The most important thing to remember about the triangle, besides knowing the creative side effects of each control, is that everything works on a system of doubling and halving. This makes adjusting all three controls at once very simple. For example, if your image is too blurry, then double your shutter speed. And to compensate for the light loss, you can double your ISO or open your f-stop one-stop. By playing with these numbers in a simple push and pull way, you can easily control your exposure and the creative effects each tool creates. If you want to see more camera tutorials, please subscribe to my channel and leave a comment about a future video you'd like to see. This really lets me know that I'm on the right track in delivering videos that people will find helpful and educational. Thanks for watching.